Hey there, and welcome back to my show. Listen, this entire season, I'm focused on comparison, confronting it and defeating it, because I truly believe that way too many of us are living our lives beneath our full potential and purpose simply because we have the belief, the lie in our mind that we're just not good enough. We live in a society that seems to be dead set on forcing us to determine our worth based on other people, whether it's their success, maybe their appearance, maybe their following on social media, or maybe even their faith journey. But that's why today, what I want to do is spend some time talking about how to really get free from comparison born insecurity, because I believe that God did not create us to live in anyone else's shadow. He created us to live on purpose because we were created with purpose. And I have the perfect guest to help us explore and unpack this conversation. Trust me, you are not going to want to miss not even a minute of this. Hey y'all, real quick, I want to make sure that you know that if you enjoy my content, if you enjoy this podcast, if you even enjoy what I share on social media or in my e-newsletters, you need to become part of my Patreon community. My Patreon community is an exclusive community that will give you access to even more content that I make available publicly. You'll get early access to my podcasts on at least a monthly basis. I'm hosting a live Q&A to recap the conversations that I'm having, and you can join at different membership tiers depending on your budget, all right? So I want you to consider joining my Patreon community because I would love to connect with you in a deeper way. All right, now back to the conversation because it's gonna be good. So there are about, 9 billion people on Earth right now. And if you are one of the 3 who does not know who Priscilla Shirer is, allow me to just briefly introduce you to her. She is an actress, not just your everyday actress. She is like a big screen actress, award-winning actress. She's a best-selling author. She is a brilliant communicator. She is an entrepreneur. She is a wife. She is a mom. And she truly is a voice not only for this generation, but I would say a voice for generations to come. And I'm so excited to be able to call her a friend. And today I could literally think of nobody better to help us unpack the question of, in the face of comparison, how in the world can we still have a life of contentment? So Priscilla, welcome to the show. How are you doing, my friend?
Girl, I am just fine. And I'm so glad to be here. And you know what? I know this is your show, but I am just taking the reins of it for just a second because I'm going to tell you this. I think I've said this to you privately in bits and
Mhm.
pieces through when we talk every now and then, but I'm going to say this on your show
Oh,
that
Lord.
I want to thank you for the integrity that you've had in the space that the Lord has entrusted to you. And I mean this so sincerely. People are watching not only when you're standing on a platform, fly as you can be, because that's the Nona way is you gonna be flying now. But not only when we see you like that, but the way it's very clear that you're honoring the priorities you're taking very seriously. Lord, what are your priorities for me in this season? And you're honoring that husband of yours and the church that the Lord has entrusted to y'all and these boys that God has given to you and the space, the unique space the Lord has given to you with ministry and business. And you're doing that with such integrity. There are people watching like me who are watching the way you are doing what you're doing. And that in and of itself is a ministry. So I just want to tell you, thank you for what you're doing. We see you. I see you, and I'm grateful for you in this time.
Thank you, friend. I'm
Mhm.
going to literally pull that audio and I'm going to make that my ringtone because girl, it's amazing how, and this actually dovetails into what we're going to talk about, but it's amazing how when you live in a world where you're confronted with so many people doing so many amazing things, you don't always see the light within you. So I receive what you're saying, and it's so hard for me to receive it because usually I'm the one who's like, but look at that person over there and all that they're doing, and I'm not really doing that, and I'm discounting it. So I thank you for speaking that into me.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I would love for us to just kind of maybe even start there. The question of when did you recognize the light that God placed in you as opposed to the many examples of people who are doing amazing things? When did you recognize the unique light that God placed in you?
You know what? I'm going to answer that question directly, but just to come to the kind of bookend it before I even answer it, the reality is that through every portion of our life, I'm 50 years old now, through every portion of our life, there are still struggles with that where you catch
Mhm.
yourself comparing, where you catch
Yeah.
yourself feeling a sense of insecurity in a particular space that you may be in where you are the novice or you're not quite sure how this thing is navigated. And so it is a constant area of growth for all of us in every season, which should give us all so much grace in knowing that we never arrive. It's a
Hmm.
constant saying, Lord, your will be done in my life. Your kingdom come, your will be done. Be glorified through me. And
Hmm.
Father, any part of my flesh that is keeping me from being able to relax into the assignment you've given me, where will you sober me up by your spirit and help me, Father, to trust your plans for me in this season. That's a constant prayer. So I
Hmm.
just want to say that whatever answer I'm going to give you, that does not mean it's because I'm an expert at it. It means because I just keep going to the Lord with it.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but to be honest with you, that journey for me probably started when I was very young because I had women in my life. I'm thinking of my aunt right now, my mother's sister. Her name is, we call her Auntie, but Aunt Elizabeth.
Hmm.
And, I was probably 10 or 11 years old where, I would follow her around during children's ministry. She was the director of the children's ministry at our local church where we both still go to this day. She did that for 30 years. And I would follow Auntie around from class to class in Sunday school when I was 10 and 11. She would help me serve snacks. I mean, she would ask me to help her serve snacks
Hmm.
and all that stuff. And one day, whatever the Bible lesson was, it was 7 and 8 year olds in that particular Sunday school class. She just looked over at me and said, Priscilla, what illustration do you have to help us to learn this lesson? And I,
Hmm.
I feel like the lesson had to do with Jonah and the big fish at the time. I feel like that's what the class was. I don't remember. All I remember was my illustration had something to do with water balloons. So I had water and balloons, and I just remember these 5 and 6 year olds, 7 year olds being captured by what I was saying.
Hmm.
They were into it. They wanted to know how this illustration was going to end. They got the lesson. They were excited about the lesson. I
Hmm.
watched it register on their faces. And then afterwards, it was my aunt who looked at me and said, Priscilla, I think that you just really can communicate in a unique, God given
Hmm.
way. That is the first time it registered to me and that it absorbed to me that maybe there was a gift of communication that God had given me. And then the Lord put women in my life throughout my teenage years, my early 20s, my late 20s. Still to this day, there are other women that I admire outside of my immediate family, even that take it upon themselves to affirm me in the
Hmm.
gifts that the Lord has given me. And that has made all the difference in the world. When there are older, wiser women than you that look at you and see things in yourself that you're not even clear on, you can't quite make out. But when someone else who you admire looks at you and says, I see you, and I see
Hmm.
God's hand in your life in a unique way, that's one of the ways where I feel like the Lord begins to affirm in us, um, form us into his image, spotlight for us the purposes for which he created us.
Hmm.
Largely that has come because of the outside voices of women that the Lord has put in my life.
Proverbs 18:21. I mean, we know life and death is in the power of the tongue.
Totally.
And so many times, I often, as I interact with my boys, I will catch myself because, you get frustrated and you'll go to
Mhm.
say something like, why would you do that? That wasn't, and then I have to catch myself and I'm like, wait a minute. Okay, my tongue right now is literally shaping and creating their
Mhm.
identity. What I'm
Mhm.
saying is actually affecting the way they're going to see themselves. I'm curious if you can think of an example because that, of course, your auntie was someone who really spoke life over you. What's your earliest memory of someone using their tongue to speak death over you? And how did
Mhm.
you receive that?
You know what? That is a very good question. I'm trying to think of the first time you asked me of one of the first memories.
Mm-hmm.
And the very first thing that comes to my mind, to be honest with you, is a girl that was near my same age. She was in youth group at our church. She decided she didn't like me for whatever reason. You know, high schoolers decide they don't
It
like
was a
you.
Tuesday,
It was a Tuesday. She didn't like me.
right?
And, but she was verbal about it. She was verbal about it to other people. And she said some very derogatory and negative things that weren't even necessarily true. She had just decided on them. And she said them to me. And hearing those words, I remember feeling jarred.
Mm-hmm.
I'm even more jarred when you know something is false, when you know that is actually not how I am at all. That's not how I think at all. That's not the way my perspective at all on this. But when someone's made up their mind about you, and I remember the way I felt so small in that moment because this young woman was very direct, and felt the need to try to call me out in front of groups of people. And I remember the way I was just jarred. My heart
Mm-hmm.
felt heavy. I remember wrestling with it. When that situation was long said and gone, the next night, the night after that, the week after that, still wrestling, losing sleep over it, worrying about it. And another friend of mine, we're still friends to this day. Her name is Nicole. I remember Nicole, after I wrestled with this for 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks, I remember Nicole looking back at me and saying, you know what, Priscilla, she doesn't like you. So it was like a light bulb went on in my head. Like, there are some people that are not going to like you.
Mm-hmm.
And that does not have to determine or direct decisions you're making or how you face your day or the decisions you make or the attitude with which you live your life. Let them not like you. It's okay. I have never forgotten that in the 35, whatever years since that happened, my friend Nicole's very sobering advice that day in a very short sentence: she doesn't like you. That is the truth. But what does that have to do with you? I've never forgotten it. And it
That
has,
is revelatory.
it
Like,
totally is.
because first of all, thank God that you had that revelation 35 years ago. I didn't have it until maybe 2 years ago. and
Good.
and it was very freeing once I
Mhm.
had it. But before then, and it was a work situation where I had some colleagues who just would not include me in things. They just, no matter what I did, like they just were literally opposed to me. And I remember one day being so perplexed and confused and hurt by the situation. And then it just dawned on me. It was like, you know what? They don't like you. And there's nothing that you can do to change their mind. So instead of like contorting yourself and instead of shape shifting and trying to figure out what's going to work, just be you because they don't like any version of you. So just be you.
And I think that that revelation is even more critical now than it would have been
Mm.
when I was 15,
Oof.
because the reality is now we have social media. So you
Mm.
are hearing the voices of people's who their opinion actually should have no weight at
Right.
all in your life. They've
Mm-mm.
made no investment in your life. They don't have any
Mm-mm.
stake in the fire in terms of wanting to see you win. They've not earned any credibility in your life. And yet those voices of those strangers is weighing so heavily on us. When we were 15, 20, 25, that we had the voices of the people who were standing right around us to
Mhm.
contend with, but not the voices of strangers. But now there's a whole crop of people, including us now, because we're on social media.
Mhm.
So here we are, grown women, and we can see the statements of people we do not know, and they do not know us, and they have no invested interest in our life. We see that statement, and it hits us hard. And so we have to constantly be coming back to the revelation that some people are not going to like us, and it's okay.
So I know that you have a level of salvation that is like the premium package.
What
Me,
does that even mean?
listen, so I can see like people can have like all these comments that are so positive and all this. If there's like one in there where the person's like, I think it was stupid. Now there was like 1,000 that were like, this was amazing. And one is like, I think it was stupid. I literally feel like I have to subdue my flesh. Now I know you see it and you're just like, praise the Lord, amen.
I'm gonna get you, Nona.
Can you, talk about, no, for real. Can you talk about the Priscilla? Because I think sometimes people do look at us, right? And they're like, oh, they're up there, preaching the word of God. And so clearly they've arrived. Like they don't struggle with anything. Can you talk about just how does it affect you? Like you have now this huge platform, like global ministry. How does it affect you at the human level when people who don't know you literally criticize and critique what they don't know? I mean, I would love for you just to give people a window into what that's like.
Well, first of all, I know you're being funny and just joking, but I do think it's important when we admire people from afar. This is how I
Mm.
am too. I admire somebody from afar for whatever reason. I have created a narrative in my head of what their life is like, of what they deal with and don't deal with, and how
Yep.
they're so different from me, and my reality. So I do want to go ahead and hold my purse while I climb down from this pedestal for a second, whatever one you may have created, because the reality is when I see that one comment, if I happen to see it, when I do, it still hurts.
Yeah.
It still makes me sad. It's still
Yeah.
like, how did they misunderstand me like
Hmm.
that? When
Hmm.
all I want to do is be helpful, or all I want to do is try to encourage them,
Hmm.
and they saw that.
Hmm.
It is hard. So I do
Hmm.
wrestle with that. But it is a constant reality for me that I am reminding myself there are people in my life who the Lord has entrusted me to them and them to me. And those are the voices that
Yes.
carry weight. Okay.
That's good.
So on a, I guess, spiritual, psychological level, I am reminding myself there are some people who have an investment in my life.
Mm.
Those are the people, when they give me a critique, I know it is
Hmm.
constructive. I know they
Hmm.
have my best interest in mind. I'm giving weight to that. All
Hmm.
this other stuff, I ain't got time. I ain't got time to wrestle with what you think and you think and you think, and you have no vested interest in my life. But this is a reminder that I have to give myself. Now, on a
Hmm.
practical level, I also want to say that I do not have any interest in searching out my own PR. I
Ooh,
am not looking at reviews. I don't know. I don't want to know. I have no idea how
good.
many people have read that book and how many people liked it versus this. I'm not looking for any. I don't Google myself. If somebody asks me how many books has such and such a book sold, or how many people saw that movie, I have no idea.
Mm.
So I am not going out to actively look. Now, obviously,
Mm.
some stuff seeps through the cracks and I see it anyway, but it is not a part of the rhythm of my life at all
Mm.
for the praise or
Wow.
to look for the negativity. None of
Mm.
that has any bearing on the choices I'm going to make for myself, my family, and the ministry that the Lord has entrusted to me. Doesn't mean it's not hard at times. I mean, the overarching cadence of our life intentionally does not include the outside voices of people who are not invested in our lives.
You just literally provided what I believe is the most critical tactic for contentment,
Mm,
which is I heard this quote some years ago, which said, "Don't let praise go to your head. Don't let criticism go to your heart."
mm, yeah,
And what happens though is we tend to seek out praise. And while we're seeking out the praise, we end up coming up against the criticism, right? And so then the criticism starts to overpower the praise. And now, because we're seeking really, it's really the validation of man, either way, right? So we're
either way.
seeking that out, which means now we've literally surrendered our identity, our worth, and our value to other people's opinions. And that is just not, it's not a healthy way to live. Like that's
Yes.
just not. When did you come to that realization? Because I can only imagine as your ministry is growing and your platform is growing, like there's always that temptation to look over the fence and be like, I wonder what they think of me. Like how did you get to this place?
Well, again, I can pinpoint, oh my gosh, so many. When you ask me that question, there are so many different ways that I can look back now and see that the Lord was gracious to me and giving me lessons along the way. Not the
Mm.
least of which is the way my parents
Mm.
always did ministry. There was no celebrity culture. There was no, my parents weren't focused on themselves. They're just the most, mom is in heaven
Yeah.
now, but my dad and my mom, they're just the most humble, no
Hmm.
high maintenance about them. That
Hmm.
they stay in whatever hotel and just whatever, wherever people put them, and did ministry and enjoyed loving people. So that was my measure of ministry, was that it's an outflowing of your real actual life with Jesus. Like, it never occurred to me that it could be a career, and
Ooh.
so you're looking for people's affirmation of you. Dad just preached the gospel, and mom was the pastor's wife at the church and served the women in the local church, and they were for real. They had integrity. So I thought that's what ministry was. It never occurred to me that we're looking for people's appreciation or lack thereof. So that was the one of the first ways that the Lord did that. But I remember this had to be my early 30s. I was in Australia and I was at a very, very large, thriving church in Australia, had locations in on different continents, actually. So everybody was sort of zoomed in via simulcast to this one conference. And I remember standing in that arena, and there were probably 35,000 people in the arena that I was at, people from all over the world, too. So they had translators that were positioned in different places. Folks had headphones on so it could be translated into different languages as it was currently happening. And then there was the simulcast happening with people in South Africa and Kiev, Ukraine. So I knew there were tens of thousands also on the other side of the screen. We get to the end of this event that is massive. And the organizers of that gathering, the pastor and his wife of that gathering, they were thinking of the next year, thinking of voices that they could invite to be a part of the next year. And here's what they asked me. I'll never forget it. They said, so we're thinking of a few people we've heard about, their integrity and their love for the Lord. We're wondering, have you ever heard of CeCe Winans? We're wondering, we've heard that Tony Evans is your dad. I think I read a book of his once, but we're wondering about his style of preaching. Do you think that will match our church? They asked me the same thing about Beth Moore. We've heard about Beth Moore, but we've never heard her or met her or seen her. And I remember sitting there thinking, how does somebody in the world not know CeCe Winans? I remember being so jolted by the reality that the world is big. And if you can be someone like those names I've mentioned and so many others, that to us in our sphere, these are people that we can't imagine not knowing or having a part of the repertoire of what it means to have leaders in the church that have helped us to see what it means to live well and to honor God with your ministries and gifts and talents. I remember it being a revelation to me in that moment that at this huge gathering with over 100,000 people, they have no idea who 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 people that they asked me about. They don't, because the world is so big that all of us are literally just a drop in the bucket on kingdom assignment. So if because our names are known in our circle, no matter how big or small that circle is, and we start to relax into the fact that everybody knows me, you have missed the fact that, like you said, Nona, there are 9 billion people on the planet. They don't know you. They don't know what you're doing. They don't know what's on your Instagram page. They don't know what book you wrote. They have no idea what it is that you're doing. So if you start to think too big of yourself, you have missed out on the reality that the Lord has entrusted you with a small corner of his big universe. So we better all just be humbled and grateful that he's given us any assignment at all.
Ooh, okay, so that right there was a sermon on contentment, because as you were speaking, and it's something I think about often, because I spent 6 years working at a company now known as Meta, formerly known as Facebook, and I would marvel at how people, they would want to get the blue check. Like I would go preach at conferences. I will never forget this one time. I preached at a church, large church. And before I was going to preach, the person who was supporting me, they said, hey, the pastor wants to meet with you. And I was thinking, okay, maybe, he wants to like pray beforehand or something like that. Maybe there's like a revelation God gave that he wants to make sure I'm aware of. And so, go in the office, and his assistant was there. And so we're sitting there, and I'm just like sitting on the edge of my seat, like ready to hear this revelation. And the pastor goes, is there any way you can get me a blue check? And I thought to myself in that moment, I was like, well, I'm about to step on a stage and preach in front of, I don't know how many thousands of people that are gathered at your church, which, our church, we have maybe 200 members. Like, we're like the average size church in America is about 200 people. So we're not a big church community, right? So for me, stepping on that platform, I'm just like, wow, this is amazing. Look at what the Lord has done. But as much as this pastor had, he didn't feel like he had arrived. And the reason he said he wanted the blue check, he literally told me, he said, because the moment I get that blue check, my friends are going to be jealous. And I was just like, you don't think they're jealous now? But it was really what it is when you start to believe that what man values is what matters, like when you start to believe that what man thinks is important, I do believe that's how you become discontented, because there's men's opinions change constantly, but the opinion of God never changes. So it's like, look, if you are walking a humble life, if you are submitted to your call, if you are surrendered and you have integrity, you like, what else is there? But if you want the approval of man, you're constantly going to be striving. And so I appreciate that you're willing to even share that, because some people might think, well, if I could just have a New York Times best-selling book, then I'll be good.
No, no. And, gosh, you just reminded me of something else. So I think I was 23. Jerry and I were engaged, so we weren't even married yet. So I must have been 23. Is the first time I met a woman who is still very close to my life and is a mentor for me. Her name is Anne Graham Lotz.
Mm.
She is one of the daughters of Billy Graham.
Mm-hmm.
I was 23 years old. She's 25 years my senior. So at the time she would have been about 50 years old. We were at a conference. I was traveling with my mom and dad, and I was standing in the lobby of this hotel where everybody was staying. And it was like a broadcasters convention. So everybody who had a radio program, preaching program, authors, publishers, they were just standing around in the hotel. And I just remember looking around and seeing the faces and the people that I so admired, and just, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I remember kind of being a little wide-eyed at that. Anne Graham Lotz walked over to me. For all these years, I have not even really known why the Lord made it so that this woman, 25 years my senior, made it her business to come over to me in the middle of a hotel and to look at me. And she said many things to that from that day. I can almost register them as clearly as if she said them yesterday. They have informed some of the most important decisions I've made in the past 25 years in marriage, motherhood, and ministry. I can trace back to what she said to me that day. But here's the one piece that I want to say. She said to me that day, Priscilla, I know you know who my daddy is, because I know everybody knows Billy Graham. And she said, I want you to know I know who your daddy is. And then she looked at me and said, it doesn't matter whether the Lord calls us to 30 million people like our daddies or to 3. We better do it to the glory of God. And then she pointed around that lobby at all those people I was admiring. And she said, Priscilla, sadly, half of these people are going to get to heaven and find out they weren't even on the front lines. They sold all the books and had all the radio stations and all the publishers and all the people wanting, and they had the blue check mark, which didn't exist. They had the blue check mark, metaphorically speaking.
Mm-hmm.
She said, what if they get to heaven and realize they didn't even do what he asked them to do? So she looked at me square in my face and said, ask the Lord what the front lines are for you, and then get on it and do not get off. 25 years ago, she said that to me. And I'm telling you, Nona, that has been the determining statement of a lot of my yeses and a lot of my nos. Is this my front line? Is it just a good thing, a fun thing, a notable thing? People will applaud the thing, all that? Or is it the front line that he's called me to? Because this brings tears to my eyes. We're going to see Jesus either because our life on earth is done, or because he steps out of the clouds and raptures us. We're going to have to give an account for the time, the talent, and the treasures he has entrusted to us. And if we're all out chasing blue check marks and the applause of people and status and esteem, if we're chasing that, what happens when we get to heaven and Jesus says, did you do what I asked you to do? And so I have constantly taken those words of Anne Graham Lotz into my heart and soul and the practical realities of our life for 25 years. And I just keep asking the Lord in each season, what's the front lines in this season? When my children were small, it was them kids. So that means so many no's out here to people, the things people thought were great opportunities.
Yep.
But it doesn't matter if it infringes on the front line for this season in my life. Same thing now that my children are older and Jerry and I are going into a different phase in our marriage and life. We're asking God now, what are the front lines? What does it look like? Give us the courage to say no to everything else, so that when we see you face to face, we can hear, well done. Because otherwise, what else? What are we doing? What are we doing?
As you were speaking, I think of Matthew 7 frequently. I think of it all the time, because I feel like it's sobering. to believe that, because we get so wrapped up in what we do for Jesus, right? Like
Absolutely.
I'm doing this in your name, and I'm doing that in your name, and I'm doing this in your name. And Jesus is like, I'm sorry, what's your name?
Who are you?
Who who are you exactly?
Oh,
Priscilla, the thought of that makes my heart literally stop. Because at that point, you're literally facing eternity. Like, so whatever it is that you did or did not do in the body, at that point, if he's like, I'm sorry, what's your name? We have a problem. And I think you're so right. And even the way that you framed it as what's my front line in this season? I think for anyone listening to this, anyone who's watching this, who you're feeling unfulfilled, right? You're feeling discontented. The question I would ask is what you just said is, well, what's your front line for this season? And can you throw all of your energy, all of your passion behind whatever it is that God is calling you to in this season? I had a young lady I had to counsel recently because she had a miscarriage, very, very devastating situation. And she said something to me that was interesting. She said, I had this miscarriage and I'm trying to build this business. And she was like, and I just feel like, the grief from the miscarriage is distracting me from what I need to do over here. And I was like, honey, I said, actually, the business is the distraction. I was like, the grief, that's what you need to focus on in this season. And that's why you're frankly trying to focus on the business, because there's something that God is calling you to. He wants to heal you, but it's so painful that you don't even want to pause enough to let that happen. And so she had the realization that, oh, okay, I've been treating the thing like a distraction when actually it's like what I need to do in this season is not the distraction. It's like, no, what has God called you to? So I just love the way that you said that. And I want to ask you a question, because in your book, you have so many books. I'm trying to think which one I want to come out. Okay, so let's talk about the resolution for women. Okay, so you talk about choosing contentment. This idea of choosing contentment means that there is intentionality behind it. Like, you're not going to just be content. How do you intentionally choose contentment when everything in you is like, I'm not enough, this isn't enough, I need more? How do you do that?
well, very practical. It's like Paul said, I've learned to be content, which when you learn
Mm,
something, that means that you are intentionally consuming it, you're absorbing
yep,
it, you're trying to
yep.
exercise a muscle that can't be developed unless there's resistance that is placed against it. So there are practical things. I think one of them we mentioned even earlier on, whether it is intentionally deciding, I am not going to look for
Mhm,
affirmation actively. Now, some of it's going to come to you, and thank the Lord for that. But I'm not going to actively seek that. I'm also not going to put myself in a position where I am centering myself amongst possible negative comments. I'm gonna keep myself out of the circle of PR that has anything to do with me. And this is whether you're in public ministry or you have a public platform in your career or not. This is for all of us,
yeah.
just not seeking that. And you have to discipline yourself with that, because social media draws you
Oh
in.
boy.
The comments draw you in. So you're going to have
Mhm.
to be disciplined about that. It's like when you're going on when you want to get your health in order. Well, there are decisions you make. There are certain things you don't put in the pantry because you know if they're sitting there, you're going to eat it. So
We're
you
gonna eat
don't
it.
buy it. You don't make it readily available. What do you have to do? Takes a lot of discipline. Do you need a
Mhm.
month fast, a 2-month fast from your social media platforms where you just shut it all down
Mm,
so that you can wean your psyche, your sociology, you can wean yourself emotionally off of the need for what it
mm,
is that you've become accustomed to. So
mhm,
ways like that where you can begin to practice, and then actively looking at what you currently have at your disposal that the Lord has given you and writing them down in gratitude. Maybe each morning it's like 10 things that you just write down to give yourself perspective before you go into the day, with so many things to
mm,
achieve, so many things to be productive in regards to. All that's healthy, but go into it from a perspective of gratitude. I already have.
mm,
Lord,
mm,
thank you for what you've already done.
mm.
Small things, from the gas that's already in the car to the marriage, the years of marriage that you've already given, to the local church body that you've allowed me to minister to, that once you start listing out the things that God has already done, what he's already equipped you for, what he's already utilized you to do for his kingdom, it recenters you in a way so that you go into your day or your week or your month or whatever, you go into it from a perspective that God has already accomplished enough. If he never does one more thing, and if I never accomplish one more thing that is applauded by other people, God's already done a thing through me. So now I'm just hand in hand with him, walking to the next thing out of gratitude, not out of the need to achieve something more.
You know, some years ago, this was maybe 4 or 5 years ago. You know how God loves to just like pull our coattails when we get a little out of line, and I was upset about something. There was something I wanted to do or achieve or something, and it didn't happen. And the Lord just like pulled my little coattails to the side, and he said something that was so profound, because I was looking at what was in my hand, like, oh, this isn't my harvest. Like, it's just the seed, God. Like, can you please, like, I need you to like make it my harvest. And the Lord said, Nona, he said, you're not worthy of more until you steward your seed like it's your harvest. I was like, but I want the harvest, Lord. Is that? And he was like, no, until you have as much gratitude for the seed as the harvest, you're not worthy of more. He's like, why would I give you a harvest when you're not even grateful for the seed that produces it?
Yeah, preach the message then, Nona.
Like, when you talk about gratitude, Priscilla, like, that I believe is the currency of contentment. You cannot be content until you start actually taking an inventory of God's goodness in the now and even in the past, right? But we spend so much time thinking about, if I get that, once I get that, then I'll be content. I want to ask you, because I know, and I have this happen to me, so I know it has to happen to you. You have people probably come up to you and they're like, I want to do what you do. And what they really mean is they want the platform you have, they want the awards you have, they want the recognition you have. What do you tell people who say that?
Tell them to do it. Do it right now. Are you waiting on a certain aesthetic before you do it? Are you waiting on a certain platform before you do it? If the Lord has called you to do ministry, do it. Ask him to open your eyes to what opportunities he is giving you to minister currently. And I promise you, as soon as you pray and ask the Lord to open your eyes to it, you start looking around going, oh, here's the audience right here. Right in your local church, right on the PTA at your kid's school, the teenagers that all come over and eat all your food out the refrigerator because they're friends with your son or with your daughter. That right there is
That's
the
ministry.
opportunity that God is giving you to minister. So when folks say that they want to do it, even writing, it's the same concept. Well, write then. Like, what you waiting on a publisher? You waiting on a title or good artwork? Or what are you waiting on? Write 300 words a day of what the Lord has put on your heart and just save it. You don't have to know where it's going in the book. You don't have to think about publishers and all. No, write it. If the Lord has entrusted you with some version of ministry in whatever genre, musically, whatever, that's supposed to be outward, ask him, what is it you want me to do with this now? And then start and trust him with the outcome. That's not your business. But being a faithful steward of what God has entrusted you with, that is your business. Get to it.
Do it. Last question I want to ask you, because I know, first of all, I know people, because I'm stirred up just in the conversation. So I know people listening to this are stirred up as well. What would you say is just one final piece of advice? Like, so looking back over the arc of just ministry and family and marriage and just all of it, if you kind of knew then what you know now about how to be content, how to not always be striving or comparing, or what would you tell yourself 25, 30 years ago, knowing what you know now?
Gosh, like 28 things just came to mind. 28. I think the main thing I would say to myself, my younger self, is to take my eyes off of myself.
Ooh.
I think that most of the trouble that I've run into internally or even relationally through the years is because I've been focused on me. I've been focused on how I feel as the priority, how I'm going to look when I do this, of how I. And self-absorption, really to the extent that we are absorbed with ourselves, wondering about how we're going to come out in the end, what we're going to look like. That is what keeps our focus and attention off of higher level things, of why the Lord has entrusted us with this opportunity to minister. There are people there. It's not about you. It's about what the Lord has entrusted you to give to them.
Wow.
And then we're on kingdom assignment. We're not here to make our names great. We're here to make his name is supposed to be great. I hope people don't know my name. That's not the goal. They're supposed to know his name because I was there. So to the extent that we take our eyes off of ourselves and begin to focus on kingdom priorities, then there's a freedom and a lightness to come with that comes with that. Because I can honestly pray and say, Lord, I'm getting ready to give this message. I've studied the best I can. I never feel as prepared as I'd like to feel. Lord, I'm going to do this film or whatever the assignment is. I don't really feel equipped for it. But Father, you know what? I'm going to give you the best that I have. And then I'm going to trust the outcome to you. I'm not going to worry about how I look or whether people receive me or not, because I'm not going to let my absorption on me keep me from the freedom that is actually required for me to give my best effort in the assignment. You can't give your best effort when you're focused on yourself, when you're absorbed with yourself. You're too consumed. It's like handcuffs. But once you say, my eyes aren't on me, Lord, I'm going to let you take care of me. I'm just going to do what you've asked me to do. Man, the freedom that comes with that, it loosens you up so that you can walk with the cadence of grace and freedom and victory that he desires to give to every single one of us anyway. That's what abundant living is. It's not that that things aren't problematic. It's that there's a grace while you're in it.
So on that note, Philippians chapter 4, verses 11 through 12, Apostle Paul says, I have learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need. I know what it is to have plenty. I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. And I think what Paul said and what you said is that contentment isn't about us. It isn't about focusing on us and what I need and what I want. It really is about keeping our eyes on Jesus and what he's calling us to. And whatever situation we find ourselves in, if he is in it with us and he's promised to never leave us and never forsake us, then that means that contentment is possible if only we choose to receive the gift of it. So Priscilla, you are such a wealth of wisdom. I appreciate your transparency, your vulnerability, and just being willing to share the fact that, look, beyond the success and the platform and the anointing and the favor, you also are human and we all are in the same boat. We're all on the same journey. And so for everyone who's watching now, you now realize that even the struggles that you have, we all have them. But guess what? God is still faithful. He is faithful. He is powerful. And he will always be with you in it. So Priscilla, thank you for your time. Thank you for your wisdom. And I really, really appreciate you, friend.
Appreciate you too. Thanks for having me.
Hey friend, thank you so much for listening and maybe even watching this episode of the Nona Jones Show. If you enjoyed this conversation, I want to encourage you to become a member of my Patreon community. You see, on Patreon, you're not only going to get full-length episodes of my podcast, but you will also get early access to any new content that I share, including new podcast episodes, sermons, even behind-the-scenes clips of my travels. And depending on the tier at which you join, you will also be invited to some live Q&A conversations that I have with my Patreon community. So what I want you to do is head over to patreon.com/Nona Not Nora to get signed up today. I want to see you in my community. Thanks for being here.